I'm John Heides from Hudson County View, and today I'm joined with former Hoboken Council President Tony Soares, and we wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on in the Biosphere City. Tony, thanks for joining me.
Oh, good evening. How are you? Thanks for having me.
So,
Pretty excited. Pretty
look,
exciting.
yeah, look, I mean, obviously a lot of chatter, a lot of heat on this races. So let's just go ward by ward, and we'll see where the conversation takes us.
Sure, sure.
So in the first ward, obviously that's the only one where we don't have an incumbent. Councilman Mike DeFusco's not running again. So instead, we have Paul Presenzano running as a critic of the administration. He also has the Presenzano Civic Foundation that he's been running for a couple years now, and he's taking on Rafi Cordova. He's the chairman of the Red Leveling and Stabilization Board, and he's got the endorsement of Mayor Ravi Bala. And then we also have Leo Pellegrini, the former Health and Human Services
Mhm.
Director for the city. So, pretty unique matchup, I think, and this one probably has the highest likelihood of going to a runoff. But what do you think beyond that?
It's I mean, I think it's going to be a really interesting race. I mean, Paul's been working really hard, Presenzano. I think that from what I'm told, there's a lot of. I mean, when you have the power of the administration behind you or City Hall, Rafi Cordova is well funded. From all I can see, is he's getting huge donations, and Leo Pellegrini has probably the best name recognition in the city of many of the candidates that are running, and with major senior citizen buildings in that ward, and Leo Pellegrini being the former director of Health and Human Services, he had quite a bit of contact and provided a lot of services and assistance and aids to residents in the senior housing. So a lot of people know him, and he has recreation experience and parks. And when he left City Hall, he kind of got a nice boost from Dawn Zimmer because she paid him a tremendous compliment that on his way out.
Yes.
So I think that from what I could see, if you just went by conventional wisdom, you would say it's really kind of between Paul and Rafi Cordova because they've been the most present and they've been spending the most on media from what I can see. And it seems like Cordova actually is putting more money against it than Paul. I know Paul, from what I understand, has a few mailers. I've seen a few of them, but he has time on his side because he's been doing it longer and he's been running for a while. And I think everybody knows who Paul is by now in terms of those who are paying attention. I think there's still a lot of people. And I've lived in Hoboken 33 years. I never met Mr. Cordova until recently, and that was just kind of quickly.
Now,
So,
on
and
that point, obviously, you've had some pretty pointed criticism of Mr. Cordova. So
yes,
why do you feel like he's not a good fit for the council?
well, I think when you make a couple of criticisms, like I was upset when someone, I came from a background where you run for office based on you've done activism, you've done service to the community, you've been involved in major things in town, and I just feel like from what I've seen from him, there's a little bit of a smell test that he's not passing for me, which is okay. I was on the city council. I was part of the Fund for Better Waterfront. I was on the city council during 9/11. I was there when the towers fell. I was the council president. I was at council meeting, the emergency meetings we had to have the following days. I knew many of the 58 people we lost. And I know the people that hold those community group meetings after 9/11 at All Saints. And not taking anything away from anyone that did anything, but to bring that up and make that you did work in that, even if you did, it's kind of in poor taste to be using that as your credit as one of your items while you're running for office now or why you should be elected. I haven't heard anything from him about budgeting, about criticism about like good or bad on issues. He's just kind of like, I landlords are bad. I'm gonna protect the tenants, which everybody wants to protect tenants. I voted for rent control protections as council president. I think there are certain things that need to be changed. I think this last ordinance change is unfair to tenants and to landlords. And he said nothing on it. He didn't give an opinion on it. In fact, he's supported by the person that the mayor tossed from the rent control board, which is a little unusual, which makes me wonder what kind of deal might have been cut.
Fair enough.
Not maybe one deal, maybe a deal wasn't cut, but in Hoboken grand tradition of somebody giving an endorsement, that's out of character, and then Mr. Cordova is gonna, if he gets elected, he will be off of the rent control board. There will be rent control vacancy. The person that he replaced is now supporting him. There's going to be, it's a little unusual.
Strange times always in Hoboken, really. So
Yeah.
he has obviously said that there's no deal, but I guess we'll see what happens on November 8th.
Yeah, I mean, they're both running good campaigns. I mean, he's running a campaign. They're running literature based, like, look, you come to the party with, you can only, it's not easy to get people to run for office. And, if they had to, either side, whoever, people are criticizing Paul, saying he created a civic association in order to have a resume, which, that would be quite an expensive thing. But I would say lots of politicians, create civic associations. Mayor Stack, Senator Stack has one. Mayor Russo had one. Councilwoman Mason had one. They still run them after they're out of office, and whether they did it for political motives or not, kids got scholarships. People got meals, help with rent. That all those things that civic associations do. So hey, that's a benefit. So I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think, but I think that putting with Leo in the race, I think that there's a chance of a runoff, a good chance of a runoff. And the
Okay.
first ward has had runoffs before in my history of living here. I remember back in the 90s, there were quite a few. There may have been 2 or 3.
Got it. Okay. So let's go to the second ward now. Technically, you do have 3 candidates on the ballot, but Pat Waiters is also running for Board of Ed. She's made it clear she's
Yeah.
really not interested in the council seat, hasn't done any mail or really much else in the council race. She actually endorsed Tiffany Fisher, who's of course the incumbent, and then she's running against Marla Decker, who's endorsed by the mayor. How do you see this one shaking out?
Well, look, I mean, professionally, Ms. Decker sounds very impressive. I know of her from everything she's done at the Board of Education, Public Education Foundation. Obviously, I've been a condo board president, so I know that's a lot of work. And I know that she's one of her. Let me correct myself. One of her bullet points on her resume is that she was on the Hoboken Democratic Committee. Tiffany Fisher, who, no one's going to argue that she doesn't work a lot. I mean, she's a prolific writer. She writes, a lot of emails, and people love that. There's people that really love it. I mean, some people make jokes about it that, they're too long and stuff, but they're full of information. And even if you don't read them, you can come away with a sense that she really works really hard. Sometimes, one of the things that, she's strong in her opinion. So sometimes you have to, really make a case, so when she's objecting to the mayor or the administration, sometimes people will view that and use that against her and saying she's argumentative or she can't get along. But, she's trying to get her point across. They're getting their point across. I've been in the council minority, and in the majority. And when you're in the minority, you tend to have to, crack a few eggs and be a bit of an agitator. And I see that as kind of what Tiffany Fisher is in a good way. And I think that any attempts to say she didn't do enough when it came to the monarch would just be an utter fabrication and spin. And that would make anybody who would say that she didn't do enough on that fight would probably lose more credibility making that statement than help. They would hurt themselves more than help themselves. I don't know Miss Decker, but I did see a few of her mailers, and just from an advertising past of mine, I saw a calendar and it had like just 3 dates filled in. It looked very fabricated. Not saying that it was a bad thing. It just didn't look sincere. But I do think that Tiffany's got a real race on her hands, and 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 she's obviously working. She's not taking it for granted.
You think Fisher wins?
If I was to predict, yes, but things have been things have been been surprises. I mean, I can, not to go back 20 something years, but when I ran with $15,000 against a candidate that I think, a person who was appointed to the vacancy, high school football coach, popular guy, just won the state championship, and he spent 150,000 with the support of City Hall and the whole county and fight against him, and we won. So if the public sentiment is against you, the money is not going to be there. But I don't see that in that ward. So I don't see there being a large anti incumbent
Sentiment?
sentiment in the second ward. I think there's people that when you're there's, of course, everybody has their detractors. You're nobody until somebody hates you, and if nobody hates you, that means you didn't try to do anything, and
Certainly.
we're just blah.
Got it. Yeah, I not much to disagree with on that point. Now, third and fourth, there's not much to say. Mike Russo's going to win really big. I would say probably anywhere in the 75-80% range. Obviously,
Hmm.
Ruben Ramos is unopposed. I feel like there's not much to add, but go right ahead if you'd like.
No. Well, here's what I would say. It's like if I was in those wards, and I do know both those well, very well. Well, full disclosure, I am a supporter of Michael Russo's, supporter of Ruben Ramos's. So they are the two candidates I've contributed the most to financially, and just as, and Michael and I served on the city council together for a few years, and I supported him when he ran the first time. And when it comes to the third ward, there's nobody that can represent that ward better that I've seen come forward in my time here, because he really lives it. I mean, Michael is he's I could say he's an old school politician in the classic sense of he's a ward councilman. He everybody knows him. He will, if you call him up to, hey Michael, I need to get to the doctors, he'll drive you to the doctor. Some politicians, modern day politicians, will say, you call them up, hey, I need to get to the doctor, and they'll tell you how to they'll suggest you download the Uber app. So there's a difference, and Michael has, he's not old, people will want to paint him on things based on his father, and I think that's unfair, because he's very different, because I was on the city council with his dad when his dad was mayor for a year, for an 18 months, and then when we defeated his administration, and me and Dave Roberts, Ruben Ramos, and Carol Marsh, and then when we took over, the majority, there was a different council person in third ward, and then we ended up with Michael ran into, we inherited someone. I think it was Rosanna Drula, and then when she left, Michael Russo ran for against Vinny Adio, a vacancy there. So Michael's a hard worker. So and Michael has a independent running against him, who is running a very interesting campaign. As you know, I never really was very excited by Twitter until this election, and I find it kind of fun, but I find it also kind of like a role in Twitter and X for me is, kind of calling out bullshit. And but I think that if you're Michael or Ruben, you've got a really nice, you could say, well, they could just sit back and do nothing. But when you don't have an opponent against you, you should do what Brian Stack does and try to get as many votes as you can, because if you want to run for another office, and if either one of them they both have run for mayor in the past, and if they do lousy and they don't get out a volume of votes to show that they have some strength, and that they have a base that will come out and vote for them even when they don't have an opposition, then they have a problem. They'll show weakness. So they should kind of test the waters and use every election as a fire drill. And I
Mike
think that's
Russo
what
never ran
they're
for
both
mayor, did
doing.
he?
It's
Mike Russo
yeah.
never ran for mayor, did he?
No, he did. He did in 2005. He ran a slate, and he ran when it was the Marsh team, which I was on, which we split from Robert's team. Roberts. It was Roberts, Marsh, Russo, and I think there might have been another independent slate that ran at that time. But
Okay.
yeah,
Good,
yeah.
good history. I did not know that. Tony, now in the fifth ward, a lot of people think this one's probably going to be the feature matchup, the main event, if you will. You got the incumbent Phil Cohen looking for a second term. Obviously, he has the backing of the mayor, and you got Liz Ortecho, who has the support of basically the anti-team, if you will. You know, Councilwoman Fisher, Councilwoman Giattino, Councilman Ramos, to varying degrees. So, how do you think this one shakes out, and who wins?
I mean, I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be. It's. I think what's going to happen is either Phil's going to like. I think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be close, and the reason why I would say that is, and whatever happens, it's not for the lack of either candidate working really hard. I mean, I see them all over. I Phil, you know, obviously is working hard. Liz, I see her around. I see her signs everywhere, which is an impressive, showing. You know, but again, this is a ward that has, you know, a lot of housing, like you know, senior housing, and typically, you know, that population tends to go with the administration because you know they own, you know, it's a city property, you know, Fox Hill, and there's a lot of services provided, and so it provides for a lot of interaction between the council people and the residents, and they tend to, you know, rely on the politicians' consistency and the people who provided service to them over the years. In terms of the from what I'm hearing from residents, that you know, quite a few people, they like Phil. One of the things I would say, if there's any criticism, is, you know, the municipal garage you know, coming into the ward, and you know, but I would say that the one thing that would probably still be a deciding factor, if you wanted to go based on any statistics, which if anybody has them, if you look at the high school referendum vote, if anybody was just going by like if everybody on that high school vote believed that, you know, Liz is what would have, if aligns with Liz on that, or Liz aligns with them, then that's not a good sign for the incumbent. But there is quite I mean, a lot of my friends are with Phil, you know, people that I know professionally, you know, but a lot of my political friends I know are telling me, you know, Liz is getting a tremendous response at the door. And just driving down 11th Street, the signs alone show that Liz has quite a bit of support. And, you know, the old school theory is signs don't vote. But but that's usually when it's the incumbent, or it's like a political machine or a political boss, where, you know, if you went to Union City and there's a bunch of stack votes, signs up. If he was being opposed, there might be, you know, essentially somebody could go vote against him. They'll put up the sign because they you know, they don't want to tip anybody off. But in the fifth ward, where it's a very independent ward, and people aren't relying on the government for, you know, employment or anything, you know, these brownstones, they put up signs on the window. Nobody's telling them what to do. What I would say though is, I think it's going to be, you know, if Liz pulls out an upset, that would be quite impressive. And I think that it's going to be close, and closer than anybody expected, win or lose for either one.
So just to be clear, too close to call is how you're leaving it?
Yeah, I can't figure it. I wouldn't bet.
Coin toss. All right.
Paycheck on
So
it.
finally, let's go to the sixth ward. You got Councilwoman Jen Giattino looking for the coveted fourth term, which doesn't happen that often in Hoboken, as you know. And she's challenged by Lauren Myers, another attorney that is running with the Bala team. And you also have Ian Rintel, who owns Play Hoboken. A lot of people feel good about Giattino on this one, but what do you think?
I think that Jen is going to win. I think Jen is universally well liked, even if you're running against her. I think her opponents probably like her, and so it makes it hard. And it seems to be so far to be the most cordial campaign. The weirdest campaign, the weirdest thing I've ever seen is the opponent the administration picked for her. I don't know Lauren Meyer. I'm sure she's a nice person. She seems really friendly, and she's has professional credentials that are, quite impressive. I mean, obviously very smart, very successful. I would say this though, when you have somebody that, from what I've been told, and there's not a big voting record locally. I mean, if you've never voted locally, and it's another one of those situations where this administration seems to run a lot of attorneys, and they come to Hoboken, they work, they become members of the Democratic committee, and then they run for office within a year or two. It's just an odd situation. And the last group that I saw do that, the last person where I remember that being significantly noticeable, was Peter Camerata. He kind of came to Hoboken, he joined the Democratic committee, he became like vice chair. Next thing you know, he runs for council. He beat me by a few hundred votes, but not until the runoff. I beat him in the initial. And then, he ran for mayor, and Dawn Zimmer almost beat him, and then he got indicted. That's funny. The funny thing is that both Dawn and I, at one point or another, lost to Camerata, but then obviously she eventually prevailed once he was out. But when the two people I lost to went to jail, and Dawn could say the same when it comes to Camerata. So you lose, but you got a consolation prize there. Anyway, not saying that Miss Meyer's going to jail. I doubt there's any chance of that. I'm just not trying to make a parallel with her, because I don't know her well enough, and I don't think anybody knows her well enough. I just think that if you're voting for Lauren, you're probably voting because you support the mayor. But Jen, I went to Jen's kickoff. She's a friend, and if I lived in her ward, I would be voting for her. And I couldn't believe the range of people. It was probably the biggest kickoff that I saw this season. She had people from, I saw business owners, I saw people from real estate community, people from like local artists, I saw little store owners, families, all kinds of people. And sometimes people that you would think they wouldn't want to be public about their support because they fear, repercussions from, like in any city, like any typical government, might take it out on them when they go to get something done. So and I think it's a testament to Giattino, because she's everywhere. She really is like in the way of like a classic politician, of a classic ward council person, in a good way. Like, she knocks on doors and stuff. I have a client and a friend who lives in her ward. They were having a problem with a neighbor throwing their garbage. Like, the neighbor was throwing their own garbage into my friend's garbage can on Bloomfield Street, and we didn't know how to handle it, and so we called Jen. Jen went over and knocked on the person's door and left a handwritten note. Hey, if you need a garbage can, I can help you out. If you're having a hard time, but you can't be throwing your trash in the neighbor's trash. And it stopped. And most council people wouldn't do that. Like, I think when I was on the city council, if somebody asked me to go deal with the trash, I would be like, I don't do that. But Jen does that. And I think it's going to be very hard. I would think that no matter, it's pretty, Laura Meyer's in a tough spot, because, whether you're running against her and against somebody as popular as Jen Giattino, and people are going to demonize you no matter what. Unfortunately, I don't think she has enough of experience in town to counteract that. And people, whereas like, I know people that know Marla and say, oh, okay, yeah, I know her from the Hoboken Public Education Foundation, or this group or that group, or my building. So they're kind of like, okay, that's a matchup, two people that have equity in the neighborhood. Whereas with Lauren, she is kind of new to the scene, and I hope she stays involved. If she wins, okay, I hope she's independent. But I don't see much independence from the people who have been elected so far under this administration.
All right. So
So I would say Jen. I would put my. Jen's. I think it's Jen's going to take it. Ian, so and let's not. I don't want to dismiss Ian Rentel because he's running a pretty smart campaign in terms of his facts and things. What I found, it's getting a lot of traction this week. It's a little late, but is the movie theater information that he's been talking about. What happened with the movie theater and how that should have never been sold and how it was a missed opportunity. I don't know what you can do with that now that it's happened. Kind of like usually if you put an example like that up, you have to say, well, this is what I would have done. And when next, if this happens, I will make sure this kind of stuff doesn't happen. Which but I do say, like, he runs a really cool business. It's right near my house and it's super popular and it's very creative. And he does think very creatively. And who would have thought you could take an old warehouse and put this little bowling alley and this game board club and the golf simulators, and he turned like adaptive reuse into a really cool space over here. So, but that's in the Fifth Ward. So, but he's in the Sixth Ward. That's historically been a very independent ward. Dave Roberts won there for many years, and again, like Jen, Dave Roberts and Jen Giotino are those like retail council people that they knock on your door, they go to see you, they send you a card when your kid is sick, and they will drive you to your doctor's appointment like Michael Russo would, So I think that Jen is gonna win,
right.
and I don't think there's gonna be a runoff in the Sixth Ward.
So to recap, you think Paul's the top vote getter in the first, but Paul and Rafi will go to the runoff. The second, you think Tiffany wins in a little closer than expected race. Russo in a landslide. Ramos, I guess, in a landslide, for lack of a better term, obviously not running against anyone. Fifth, too close to call, and Jen in a pretty comfortable margin. Is that about right?
Yeah, I would say so. Let me go back to Fisher and versus Myers. I don't think
Decker.
it's going to be. I mean Decker. I'm sorry, apologies, but I
Okay.
think that that this is an administration that is like I look. I worked on the DeFusco campaign. We thought he was going to win, and 2 days before the election, that disgusting flyer came out. It was disgusting for what it said on it, how it targeted the mayor and his family. But I know Mike DeFusco, and I know that he didn't do that, and I know the people in his campaign had nothing to do with it because I saw, and I'm not trying to make a plea for Michael right now, but I saw the look on the horror on Michael's face when it was there, and I saw him and his partner at the time how upset they were, and they were out there that night pulling it off cars. And people who do that people who put that kind of hate out are usually proud of it. Like they don't regret. They don't. That's racism. People who are racist kind of support their own racism. And Michael didn't do it, and and so I don't think that barring anything like that happening in the next few days, I think Tiffany will win. I don't think that any of the mayor's candidates themselves will be behind a piece of hate like that. But we do have a lot of PACs and unions and big money. And this is a town where there's all this untapped land that's still being doled out and developed. And when there's a lot of money in this, this race could determine who makes hundreds of millions of dollars and who doesn't. And so I don't think I think that there's still time for some dirty surprises. But I think that it all depends. All of this depends. Our predictions on the turnout. If people don't vote on Tuesday, the general population, I think that it will spell a better night for the mayor's team if less people vote than if I think that for the Fifth Ward, they need to have. I mean, a lot. It has to be a big voter turnout, and also in the Second Ward and the First Ward. Those wards have to, they have to get out. Paul has to get all his positive IDs out to win. Liz has to get all her positive IDs out to win. Yeah, I think that's going to be important.
No, thanks so much for your thoughts.
Yeah,
Obviously we talk quite a bit between now and Tuesday,
yeah.
so let's
Yeah,
hope
and
we
I
have a
mean,
good one.
and full disclosure, like, look, I obviously, I'm not hiding my position, but I'm just speaking from as an observer. But I'm not pushing, trying to sway the election any way or not. But I do think that it's been a rather tame season. I think there hasn't been any really major controversies. I talked to a couple candidates. I've talked to on both sides. I talked to Phil. I talked to Tiffany, and when you're the candidate, any criticism you see is like, oh my god, can you believe they're doing this to me? And I look at that and I go like, that's nothing. Like 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 this has not been this like any of the criticisms or what people today think are hit pieces. It's like softballs compared to Hoboken 20, 30 years ago, from what I understand and what I experienced myself, or what Ruben experienced. But I think that the council is relatively going to be, one way or the other. It's just going to be a 1 or 2 vote majority, with Michael Russo kind of having that sway vote like he tends to have, which he uses it positively. He does. He doesn't vote lockstep with anybody. If you've
All right.
noticed that with the Streeteries last week.
Yeah, looks like he's already definitely mulling over a run for mayor, but that's another conversation for another day.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah,
let's see where Tuesday
yeah.
takes us.
It's too early in the week to talk about in 2 years, unless someone decides to go for higher office, as the mayor already announced. But if he decides to leave sooner to work on that or not. But I would like to end with one thing.
All right.
I did think what changed the election in the past couple days was the report that you put on up the other day, which was the statement by Dawn Zimmer about rebuild by design. And
Yeah.
I think that's made if people are paying attention, that could be a significant boost to the opposition to the administration. I mean, when you have the mayor being criticized by the past mayor, who kind of anointed him, saying, but Mayor Bala is helping a neighboring mayor prevent flood prevention system in the town be built and finished. That's pretty rough. That's pretty that could do a lot of damage. That could throw an election. I will say this: Dawn Zimmer still has a lot of sway with with residents in town, especially in the second and sixth and fifth wards. I mean, she's pretty much an icon. I mean, she does have. There's a lot of heart for her. I mean, I think she would still be the mayor if she had stayed, if she had decided to.
All right, Todd, thanks for
Yeah.
that added piece
All
of
right. All
context.
right.
Thanks for all your predictions, and
Great.
let's see what happens on Tuesday.
Great.
All right,
So,
man. Have a good night.
thanks a lot. Bye bye.